again, the buying a boat discussion. Um, it keeps coming up. It keeps coming back up. I think a big part of this sailing thing is the dream. And nothing means the dream more than just dreaming about your next brand new boat. There's always you're always tempted to see a bigger, better thing, and I'm certainly guilty of that. Like I'm constantly thinking and dreaming about my next boat. I've been living aboard and sailing around for the last pretty much 9 years on this Bavaria Cruiser 40 2013. I purchased this boat brand new in 2013, and it's been pretty much my home ever since. Like I go back and forth from Mexico on the west coast right now, where the boat is, to Quebec, where my family is. I've been doing that a lot. I've been sailing since forever, and it's still a dream. It's still the life that I'm passionate about. So I certainly understand somebody that wants to um, get access to that life for a year, 2 years, take a hiatus in a career or something like that. Now, people are looking, and I had posted a video of the performance of my Bavaria in heavy weather, and somebody took that as reassurance that this boat was a great boat. Which I'm saying, I have to say it is in some ways. It is not a purpose built blue water boat, and it shows and it tells me every day. So take that for what it's worth. I'm doing the trip. I'm living this life on my Bavaria, and I'm still passionate about it. But I sure wish that I had maybe postponed the trip for a bit and waited till I had more money in order to buy more of a purpose built blue water boat that I would have not thought of the next boat. That would have been the ideal boat if that ever exists. Now, I'm talking about blue water and a Bavaria. What are the differences? Basically, you have to understand that there's a whole class of boat, and Bavaria is not the only one in there. Whether it's a Beneteau, a Jeannot, a Hanse, Dufour, all these boats are built to meet a price. So yeah, they're built to be nice. Yeah, there's a certain performance expectation that you can expect out of them, like that you're gonna get out of them for sure. But mainly, they are trying to meet a price where the boat manufacturer feels that there will be the most demand for a particular size or kind of boat that they want to build. So you have to keep that in mind. It's very important a concept where other boats, if we talk about, let's say, an Island Packet or a Tartan, or let's say another, or my favorites, the Albert Gracies, or these kinds of things, they're more built towards a standard. So what do I mean by a standard? It's like they're trying to imagine the ideal traveling around the sea sailboat, and they're trying to build a boat that will best fulfill that task, that mission, regardless, or pretty much regardless, of the price that the boat is going to come up with. So it's two very different approach, and unfortunately for most people, and I'll include myself in that category, those purposefully designed boat like the Albert Gracie or the Island Packets, or those kinds of boat, they're budget wise kind of out of reach. Like they're very expensive, and unless you look at them on the used market, which is a very, very good thing to do. So if you're gonna buy a used boat, what happens is every boat depreciates in value, and so you're gonna find a lot of these high-end production boat like the Albert Gracies and the Island Packet that are gonna sell with a bit of a premium compared to an equivalent size Jeannot or Beneteau. Like they'll have a premium, and sometimes up to double the price. But they come down to about, let's say, $200,000 mark, for a 40, 45 footer, depending on the equipment list, the date, and the state of repair of these boats. And I think these are very, very interesting opportunity for somebody that would be able to purchase them. Although there are great boats, typically in Canada anyway, it's not the case in the US, but in Canada, the financing companies don't finance these boats if they are more than 10 years old. Basically, it gets really hard to buy a boat with a financing if you get a boat that's more than 10 years old. And so that's the reality of it. But there are much better boat uh, in terms of how they're conceived and their design and how solid they are. Now, it's always a give and take. Like I'm saying, solid. So I feel my Bavaria lacks solidity. Now I've adjusted the way I navigate with it. So I go in calmer seas and lighter wind, and I actually enjoyed sailings in calm seas a lot more. I've set up the boat for that. Like I have a folding prop and I have a code zero, and that allows me to go out sailing in like the bracket from 7 to 15 knots wind, and the boat will perform outstandingly well in those conditions. Now a heavier boat, let's say my Albert Grassi 40, which weighs about 5,000 pounds more than my Bavaria 40. I mean, 5,000 pounds in very light wind. We can put a much bigger sail. We can try all kinds of things, but 5,000 pounds will count and will slow down a boat in light condition. Now, I've never sailed the Albert Grassi 40. Unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity. I'm just saying that's the physical logic, the basic principle logic of first principle logic that our friend Elon Musk is always talking about. Like, 5,000 pounds more will, generally speaking, equate to less performance in light wind. So where do you go from there? Like, what do you buy? First of all, like, I want to ask, like, what do you buy? Like, so you're asking, what do you buy? I say, why do you want to buy a boat? Like, let's come back to that. Like, why do you want to buy a boat? And like a boat is a huge commitment in terms of time, in terms of money. It's really a heavy commitment on somebody's life, unless you have unlimited amounts of cash and you can just afford to drop $500,000 and then you have another $200,000 to pay for all the maintenance, and and you have unlimited cash that way that you can hire techs in the marinas to do the work for you and all that kind of stuff. If you're in that position, then yeah, sure, buy a boat, and if it means the world to you to be able to go anywhere you want and you have that kind of money, sure. But if you're on a budget, if you're a bit more like me and you're doing this on some kind of a budget, like I'm in between that, like I'm not a super low budget person, but I have a budget. Like at some point the credit card is not unlimited. So now what do you do? Like, so you're gonna be looking at a production boat, or maybe at an older, higher end, high quality boat. I would suggest that you look into those high quality boat that I've named, the Island Paquettes and the Albert Grassis of this world, on the used market. I think they are a huge bang for buck, and they're really great that way. Uh, and a lot of time they come really well equipped, and they are really built to another standard, and it's something that you should consider, because before you put your like Geno Beneteau used back to a standard where it's able to do the trip that you're going to want, you're going to spend that extra $100,000 on equipment and refurbishing and repair and new motor and all that kind of stuff, which happens to all boats. You're going to say yes, but eventually, like if you do it on a higher end boat, it's a boat that's going to last you forever, vice a boat that eventually will show its limit. Now, understand me well, not that a Beneteau or a Geno is not able to go around the world. Absolutely, a Beneteau and a Geno will go around the world. There's no doubt about that. I mean, many people do it. It's not undoable. I'm doing it on the Bavaria, and I'm going to get back to the Caribbean via the Mediterranean after crossing the Pacific, and I have no doubt my boat will get me there. I'm not doubting that. I'm just saying the boat shows that, there are conditions that it doesn't like to be sailed in, and there are fragilities to it that you'd rather not want to have if you're 2 weeks away from land type deal. So that's the lowdown. So what do you do now? Okay, I'm saying, why do you want to buy a boat? So what is your project? Like, really define that. You got to go back before you say I'm buying this boat or I'm considering this or that boat. Go back to what exactly realistically am I going to do with this boat. I'm saying that because I see most boats just being parked in the marina and never going out, and people basically not using them. Why that is, I mean, there's 1,000 reasons. People realize it's tougher than they think. They realize it requires more money than they have, and eventually the cruising dream goes away. We're using the boat locally here and there, and then eventually we realize that it's a money pit and we just liquidate the boat for very cheap. I mean, that scenario repeats itself all around the world in all kinds of marinas. I see it all the time, and it's just the nature of things, and I've been seeing that since the last, I would say, 40 years, back when I was sailing with my parents on Lake Champlain. So if you don't want to fall in that category, you got to go back and say, okay, exactly what is my budget? Exactly how much time do I have? And then we're going to say, okay, these are the voyages on a sailboat that you could do for that amount of money and that amount of time. So you need two very rare things. You need money and time. So a lot of people have a lot of money and no time, and other people have lots of time, no money. I mean, you gotta put the two together somehow. Do you have a Patreon? Do you have your YouTube or your Instagram that's giving you money and time? Now, how much time are you gonna dedicate to producing those videos? And meanwhile, you're not sailing. I mean, it takes a lot of time to do video edition, and that's why now I do more of this first-person sort of video type deal. I try to share my knowledge with you guys, or with you guys and my experience. I mean, two things: how much money do you got, and how long are you gonna go for? You got to know these two things, and then that defines a possible. Like that defines a set of possible, and then we say, then that's gonna determine like what boat are you gonna get. So, and I would say I don't know, I can't throw exact numbers on there, but I would say the outstanding majorities of people should just not buy. Just don't buy a big sailing traveling boat. It's very expensive, it's very time consuming. Chances are like it's more challenging than most people realize, and all kinds of people on the internet are trying to tell you it's easy. I mean, it certainly is doable. I'm not trying to say it's not doable. It is doable. It is not as easy as you see it on Instagram or YouTube. And you know, the other part of it is, so you could rent. Like I'm here in the west coast of Mexico, just north of me is the Sea of Cortez. It's gorgeous. It's wonderful out there. It's crazy. And you have Dream Yacht Charter that has a base, and you can just rent a boat from them. It's so easy. I mean, that's a good way to go. It's really good, you know, like because you pay $4,000 or $5,000 a week for that boat, and then when you don't want it, you just give it back to the charter company. It costs you 10 grand to do 2 weeks. That's cheap boating, ladies and gentlemen. Like that's very, very cheap. It's as cheap as it can be. Same thing happens in the Caribbean, in the Bahamas. Same thing happens in the Mediterranean. You just go to the Mediterranean in Croatia or Greece or wherever, rent a boat for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, costs you $15,000, or even if it's $20,000. That's cheaper than a boating season. That is cheaper than your first boating season as a boat owner by a lot. And you'll just be sailing. And if there's a problem with the boat, the charter base is not too far, call these guys up, Protect comes up, fix the problem, or they give you another boat, whatever it is, and you have no problem in life. That's a much better way to go. The other way to go is like, if you're not going to say, hey, I'm going to cross the Atlantic Ocean and I'm going to do the whole Caribbean Sea thing, and I'm going to go across the Pacific. So let's say you'd want to just live the Caribbean lifestyle. You're much better investing whatever money you got into a real estate deal in the Caribbean, and then buy yourself like a little day out boat type deal to go out in the ocean to snorkel and scuba dive and whatever else you want to do. Like, you'll be better off in the end if you're just going to do the Caribbean. So somebody that wants to do the Caribbean arc, I say like just save your money, put that in some real estate investment, and just go from island to island. Like with, I mean, it's not real sailing anyway. Like to go from Antigua to Guadeloupe or Martinique, like that's 300 miles. I mean, you can do that in it's 48 hours of sailing. You don't need a big liveaboard sailboat to do that. You buy yourself a real estate investment in the Caribbean, and then you go from island to island if you want to change island, or maybe some timeshare or something like that. And then you rent a boat, like a day out boat, when you want to go out sea. A lot simpler, a lot easier, a lot more bang for the buck. You haven't bought a boat, and your money is safer. The only real reason to buy, in my mind, and that's very subjective, I'll admit, but in my mind, the only real reason to buy a sailboat is if you have a project of a long voyage across oceans with a sailboat. And unfortunately, those production boats I was talking about earlier, they're not designed for that. They're designed for the charter fleets of the Caribbean, the Mediterranean, and the Sea of Cortez, and maybe a little bit in French Polynesia. So these boats are not designed to cover long distances. They're designed to operate close to a charter base where there's a professional tech that can change any part at any moment. That's what these boats are. You know, Beneteau must sell probably, I don't know what the exact number is, but I'm sure that it's in the vicinity of 80%, probably 85% of their boat in charter fleets. So it's not surprising that these boats are designed, and they're the biggest seller of sailboats in the world. So it's not surprising that if they sell 85% of their production to a charter fleet, that you're going to get a boat that's adjusted to a charter environment. I mean, it's easy that way. That's how it's done, and there's nothing surprising about that. So they're not designed for long range cruising. And then I'm saying, well, if you're not going to go long range cruising, there's no point owning a boat really, because you should just put your money in some real estate investment somewhere. If you're just going to sleep in a marina or sleep at anchor next to a marina, might as well buy yourself a condo down there and go out at sea with a rental boat. That's my take on it. So that's the why. I mean, somebody comes to me and say, "Oh, I'm just going to do the Caribbean." I'm like, buy yourself a condo. I mean, it's and when you look at it, like these catamarans that they're renting in the Caribbean, those lagoons, like they don't point upwind. They're not real sailboats per se. They're like just real estate on the water, and a lot of times somebody will buy them because they feel like it's cheaper, because they'll see a condo or a house at $500,000 or $600,000, and they'll think that the $450,000 lagoon used is a better deal. It's cheaper. In reality, it's not. When you factor in all of the cost of boat ownership, and you factor in that it's not a real estate investment that's going to appreciate in time, your catamaran in the Caribbean is going to cost you way more than any real estate move that you could do. So that's the lowdown. Happy sailing to everyone. Of course, that's just my perspective on the boat life and the boat buying business. I'm sure a bunch of people are happy, like doing their sundowners in the Caribbean and those big lagoons. I just, I would buy a house if I was going to do that. So see you out there. At some point I'll be back there in the Caribbean, or I'll be in New York, and we can talk that over rum and Coke or something.